Well, welcome to the tutorial in terms of your Task 1. So as in class, we've been looking at the Australian curriculum, and Task 1 speaks straight into that area. And what it asks you to do is to examine the Australian curriculum and then look at it and say, what am I good at? What are my strengths and weaknesses? And then what sort of resources I would use to therefore build up my competency so that you can step out in the classroom having a pretty good understanding of what the Australian curriculum is. So the task is organised in those sort of levels. So quickly having a read of the task, it's self-critique, so that's your personal knowledge. The Australian curriculum, we won't need to do the QCAA curriculum, we'll do that in another curriculum pedagogy unit, so let's ignore that one. And look for your personal gap, identifying potential gaps in your understanding. Then you look at literature review, textbooks, etc., and how you would close the gap. Now, it's not really 1,500 words, that's an equivalency because we've formatted this to be in a table. So let's have a look. Select a topic in 9 and 10 because that's the top end of the junior high school years, so that'll give you a good sample of the curriculum. Review the topic. Every area has different strands. There might be 3 strands in English, for example. There's 3 strands in science. Some have only 2 strands. So have a look at some of those content strands because some process strands are skill-based. So what we're looking to do is your knowledge area. So we're looking at content areas. So, and then we're going to have a look at some Christian resources and then pedagogical resources about how do I then teach this area. And a bit of a personal reflection, not too long, on how you're going. Not going to be marked of your reflection as, oh, I'm not sure on things. It's really about an honest assessment. I'm interested to know that you actually examine the curriculum. At the end of the day, what I'm going to mark is, have you examined the curriculum? Have you given a fair assessment of your capacities and your strengths and weaknesses? What range of resources you've used? And then what you would do about it. Okay, so your reflection could include some sort of action plan to go forward. What I have here is the table which is on the assessment guide. Now I've done this for accounting, which is actually not a year 10 area, so you can't do a cut and paste, guys. But this is not the whole deal at all. I've just shown you of that's an accounting topic that is in the content area. These are the person's personal competency, there's their strengths, and there are the weaknesses. So I'm going to be looking now in your documentation that follows what are accounts payable, for example. And again, a weakness in the second top is cash flow. So if you're an accounting area, then you've gone to the content areas within the curriculum here, and you said they're the things I need development in. So this is the topic of remediation, and I've put a little heading. Two or three texts, but notice applicable chapters. In other words, don't do a cut and paste textbook as encompassing everything. No, I want you to dive in. So what are the chapters? What are the areas? So perhaps some standard texts that might be at university introductory level or standard senior level texts would be sufficient for you to do that. And then you're going through different things. Web links, 3 or 4 sites that you might have that you need to develop on and so on. Other things, videos, journals, infos, other tools that you might come across. So look, this is a part example. So your full example will be more extensive in terms of what you're covering and what your remediation would look like. But in essence, it contains those elements of text, web links, sites, videos, journals, and so on that can build your capacity up in those things. What I haven't got here after the table is the additional parts, and we scroll back to the top, and the additional parts are, what are some Christian resources that you could be using and utilising in your subject area? And that's going to be more of a general coverage. It doesn't have to be precisely looking at your remediation, but it'd be a general thing. These are great Christian resources to use and have in my folio of works as I look at a Christian worldview integration across the subject. And what are some areas? Now, often what's useful here in terms of pedagogy is to have a look at the subject associations. For example, there's English Teachers Association in Queensland and Australia. There's the Maths Teachers Association, History Teachers Association, and so on. And they've always got resources that are useful for how to teach this subject. The ACEL, Australian Council of Education Leadership, for example, or ASA, the Italian Council of Education Research, is a groups of Australian-based bodies that has a number of resources. Often you find that through your teacher association websites, there'll be links to resources, and you might find that useful for you. So that is essentially the hub of the task. What I'm going to do is go now to the Australian curriculum, and just to be a bit more precise about what are the topic areas that I'll be asking you to examine. Well, we're at the Australian curriculum website. We're familiar with this now. So we're going down to an area. So let's have a look at mathematics, and let's pick year 10. Okay, and we'll submit that, and you're familiar with how that layout looks and so on. And we're scrolling down the year 10. And you notice they've got 1, 2, and 3 strands. So we're going to open those up. And here's the strands there: money and finance, patterns and algebra are the strands, linear and non-linear relationships are the 3 areas. So that's 3. Measurement and geography. We've got geometric reasoning, Pythagoras, for example, always a popular one. I love Pythagoras, triangles, the sum of the hypotenuse. What is it again? The hypotenuse is the sum of the square of the other sides, and you get the square root. There you go. Didn't explain that eloquently at all, sorry. Then you've got probability and statistics and so on. So there's your area. So what I'm looking for in that topic-wise is that's your topic. Interesting, as we look at that, you can actually go to Scoodle, as I'd recommend, and you can actually get some resources there. So some of your resource answers might actually lie in Scoodle and so on. So there's your topic for mathematics as an example. So if we go have a look at another curriculum area, we see that similarly they'll have science has its strands. So let's pick on year 10 again, and we'll open up and we'll see it has its 3 strands. Now those last 2 are not content areas. Science understanding is really your only content area. So in biology and chemistry and earth science and physics are areas, you need to have a look at what they are. So this one is inheritable characteristics of DNA, so we're talking about genetics. So that's one topic. Chemistry is atomic structure and so on, and chemical reactions. So there's your chemistry topics, here's your physics topics, and so on. Now, science as a human endeavour is a scientific understanding and so on, and influence of science, which is, you could actually grab one of those, but it's more of a skill base. Perhaps for the scientists amongst you, this one will be fine in that area there. And inquiry skills are really about not applicable for this unit, for example. Let's go to where I know a number of you are, and that's in English. Now, English is interesting. It is actually an unusual curriculum in the sense that it is thematic and it's not cyclic. And I've emailed those people about English, but for those who are coming across it in the first time, we have a look at here. It actually has 3 strands. That's normal, but they're language and variation, and it's a theme. There's not actually a content or context around this. Similarly with literacy, it's really thematic. It actually responds to some literature. Now, there's a lot of examples through Scoodle that you could have a look at, but it's actually not, you must study this book or this genre or this type. And it's similarly with literacy. So my suggestion with English is that you use about 10. So say 4 literature, 4 language, and say 2 literacy. So that level of content, in other words, pick those themes as they go across and evaluate your knowledge of those particular literature or literacy or language skills, and then develop a plan of remediation on that. So find resources that talk about, if we have a look at say a language area, understand the Australian English is a living language, blah, 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 the evolution of usage, what's the information that's about there. So there's one of your topics: language for interaction, understand the roles and relationships at laying interpersonal skills. Can I say it's a stretch for me to understand quite what that means, but I'm not an English teacher. Structure and organisation. I think you'll find lots of information about how you can do the different textual types and so on. So English is slightly different. The other areas might have some similar sort of distinctives, but I think we can chart a way through. At the end of the day, what am I after? I'm after that you've dived into the Australian curriculum and can demonstrate you have a knowledge of the Australian curriculum, that you've assessed yourself on it in terms of your own understanding, And then you said, here's a truckload of resources I'm used to be interested in. I want this to actually be something useful for you. And you've done some reflection at the end, and you've also pulled into that equation some teaching pedagogy resources and some Christian worldview resources. So the document will have all those resources in those tables. How long is it? I don't think you can actually measure how long that is. I want it to be a useful resource. It's robust. Have a look at the criteria sheet that we've got there, and it unpacks exactly what I'm looking for. I think if I just click on there, the criteria sheet is towards the end. Let's find it. Task 1, excuse me, I've just moved my screen. Personal knowledge, remediation resources, pedagogy and Christian worldview together, and have you written it in a decent way. So there's your criteria. It's the criteria match the task, essentially, is what I'm after there. So I don't think it's difficult. I want you to make this something that is actually going to be useful, and that as you do this, you'll learn more about the curriculum, you'll learn more about your own capacity, and learn to find out where some resources are. So enjoy, as we always enjoy, assessment. Love it.